It's after work hours now, and there are hardly any employees around. It's empty. It turns out both sides used to be cafeterias. Due to many factories moving away, there are far fewer employees, and the cafeterias couldn't sustain their business. They had to shut down completely. I'm here in Shenzhen, Qingqiao, and I've come across a closed toy factory. The factory was called Victory Toy Factory and was owned by a Hong Kong businessman. It had been operating in Qingqiao for quite a long time, at least for over 10 years. It's surprising to see that despite surviving the pandemic for 3 years, the factory couldn't make through 2023. I've noticed that many factories have closed down in 2023. I've discovered that a large factory in Shenzhen has relocated. This factory was called Heiko Enterprises. It's completely empty now. Even the security booth has no one in it. It's a mess inside. Everything that needed to be moved has been taken away. Even the windows and doors have been removed. I originally came here to look for a job, but I didn't expect the factory to have already moved.
The General Administration of Customs in China released data showing a significant dip in both exports and imports. In September, China's exports and imports both declined by 6.2% year-on-year when measured in US dollars. This marks the fifth consecutive monthly decline in goods exports and an unprecedented 11th decline in imports. The once reliable engine of economic growth through exports seems to have stalled. Not only has the anticipated economic rebound following the pandemic not occurred, but China's economy has also plummeted into a crisis, with foreign companies continuously withdrawing. However, some Chinese financial experts believe the decline is even more pronounced. Based on a comparison of the declared export values, they argue that exports have actually fallen by 7.3%. Notably, even if we rely solely on the official data, there's been a consistent decline in exports since May of this year, where there was an 8% year-on-year drop. By September, overseas orders had shrunk for 5 consecutive months. China's exports to developed countries saw a particularly sharp drop. In September, the top 3 export markets for China were the US, ASEAN, and the EU. Exports to the US declined by 9.3%, narrowing by 0.2 percentage points from the previous month. Exports to Southeast Asian countries declined by 15.8%, an increase of 2.5 percentage points from the previous month's decline. And exports to the EU fell by 11.6%, narrowing by 8 percentage points from the previous month. In contrast, trade between China and Russia has seen a significant surge. Bilateral trade reached $21.2 billion in September, making a new record since the outbreak of the Russo-Ukrainian conflict in February 2022. The main drivers of this trade growth were crude oil, natural gas, and grain. Despite the 10% growth in imports from Russia, a nation of only 140 million people, it doesn't compensate for the 1% decline in imports from developed countries. Although exports of China's new energy vehicles are growing, they will soon hit a ceiling and cannot offset losses in semiconductors and consumer electronics exports. Zichun Huang, a Chinese economist at London-based firm Capital Economics, mentioned in a report, foreign order indicators suggest that the decline in overseas demand is even more significant than what has been reflected in the customs data so far. Furthermore, foreign companies are pessimistic about China's economic recovery. A Reuters survey released on October 12 found that among 502 surveyed Japanese companies, 52% expect China's economic slowdown to persist until 2025, while 17% believe the sluggish growth will last until 2024. Currently, 2/3 of these Japanese companies operating in China are looking to shift their production lines to explore new sales markets. In September, a survey compiled by the Nikkei Business Daily of 100 Japanese business leaders found that 60% perceived increased risks in China. Among the 79 companies that identified increased risks, U.S.-China trade friction was the primary concern for 82.3% of respondents, followed by real estate bubble burst at 78.5% and potential conflicts in the Taiwan Strait at 64.6%. For 15 consecutive years, China has been Japan's largest trading partner. Nearly 90% of Japanese business leaders expressed unease concerning the potential burst of China's real estate bubble and ensuing economic downturn. Takashi Mori, president of Tokyo-based OKI Electric, stated, "Considering the Chinese market, our company faces significant policy risks in our business sectors. We don't view China as a key market." Japanese businesses are withdrawing from China one after another. Domestic manufacturers in Japan are shifting their equipment investments from China to Southeast Asia and North America. Kyocera plans to invest up to 100 billion yen, approximately $668 million, in its electronic component factory in Thailand, while Mitsubishi Chemical Group is establishing new factories in North America. This shift aims to diversify supply chains that are heavily reliant on China. The U.S., China's largest trading partner, has seen a trade deficit of 300 billion yuan, $41 billion in exports alone in the first 8 months of this year. One has to wonder how many orders from exporters, factories, and other upstream businesses that represents. In mid-August, Shunan Electric Shenzhen Company, which has been established for 38 years, announced to all employees that it will be dissolved. Citing a global economic downturn and adverse business conditions due to the pandemic, the company came to the decision following a shareholders' decision. Even major original equipment manufacturers like Shunan, a subsidiary of the Hong Kong-based home appliance manufacturing giant Numad, which serves renowned international brands such as Panasonic, Philips, Siemens, Electrolux, DeLonghi, and L'Oreal, have felt the pinch. Despite being recognized by Shenzhen Bao'an District as one of the top 100 processing trade exporters, the severe reduction in foreign trade orders, changes in the industrial chain, and rising operational costs have led to its downfall. In such circumstances, Shunan Electric Shenzhen isn't the only factory facing operational difficulties. Dongguan, known as the world's factory, is witnessing the closure of massive factories and renowned enterprises one after another. A brand manager who has been in the foreign trade business in Dongguan for 7 years remarked that this year has been the most challenging thus far. Many factories are deserted, some dismantling and moving, while others are overtaken by weeds. Forget about making profits, even the rent for the shop is at a loss. Since China's economic reforms and opening up in the 1970s and 80s, Chinese manufacturing has grown, not only establishing a comprehensive industrial system, but also quickly surpassing the manufacturing sectors of Southeast Asia, the US, Europe, and Japan, making China the world's factory. At its peak, out of 500 major industrial products globally, China led the production of 220. This industrial hub provided employment for a vast number of workers, further driving the growth of the service, transportation, administrative sectors, and tax revenue. Now, with massive orders disappearing overnight, factories have ceased production and shut down, causing hundreds of millions of workers to lose their jobs. As migrant workers return to their rural homes in droves, cities become desolate, affecting the service industry, weakening consumption, and leading to a rapid decline in China's real economy. Coupled with China's fundamental foreign policy shift and decoupling from Europe and the US, continue to pull out. Beijing is aware of China's economic plight. To salvage foreign investments, the government has been making frequent conciliatory gestures. In August, China's State Council issued guidelines promising to enhance the protection of overseas investors' rights, emphasizing stronger intellectual property law enforcement, all aimed at attracting more foreign investments. Dr. Xie Tian, a professor at the Aiken School of Business at the University of South Carolina, opined that President Xi Jinping's latest gestures toward foreign businesses are merely superficial rather than genuine concessions. This response comes in light of the exodus of foreign capital from China and the Chinese Communist Party, CCP's, urgent need for foreign investments to salvage its economy. In reality, the CCP harbors mistrust toward foreign companies, fearing they might ally with internal anti-communist factions or introduce democratic and liberal ideologies to China. Any ideas aligned with a free society, if they emerge within China, essentially serve as a stark contrast to the CCP's regressive practices. Outside China, a growing consensus suggests that China's economy has passed its zenith and is on the brink of decline. In the medium to long term, once it becomes evident that China's meteoric economic growth is unsustainable, or as people realize the many downsides of the high-pressure political system, perceptions may shift. Robert Carnell, a research head for the Asian Pacific region at ING Bank, noted in a report, Whatever steps the Chinese government takes in the coming months, they are unlikely to bring substantive changes for 2023, and at best can be seen as painful management tools in a transition to a lower leverage economy. Zach Cooper, a senior researcher at the American Enterprise Institute, recently tweeted, "China's economy faces long-term stagnation rather than a short-term collapse." Cooper highlighted that China is losing a primary engine for its economic growth, real estate investment. Cooper also mentioned that there are scant signs indicating that Xi Jinping is pushing for essential reforms. He commented, "Xi seems more inclined toward short-term stability than long-term growth. Hence, I anticipate he will manage to maintain his rule, as that's his paramount task, even if it means settling for a slower long-term growth outlook." Economist Louise Liu from Oxford Economics recently told German media Deutsche Welle that the slowdown in China's economy is primarily attributed to three factors: the repercussions of a strict zero-COVID policy, the government's measures to counteract the real estate crisis, and the long-standing regulatory crackdowns leading to a tense investment environment for the private sector. Over the past decade, Xi Jinping's administration has extensively promoted and exaggerated the achievements of China's economy through various channels, creating a myth of the Chinese economic miracle. The objective has been not only to instill and reinforce the legitimacy of its governance among Chinese citizens, but also to attract and retain investments from around the globe. Continuous foreign investments have provided the impetus for China's investment and export-dependent economy, enabling the continuation of this so-called economic miracle. Had the CCP not positioned itself against the major free economies of the world, or at least balanced its accounts, the bubble of the Chinese economic miracle would not have burst so soon. Ironically, the CCP mistook its inflated economy, bloated from excessive praise, as China's genuine economic reality, extravagantly squandering both present and future wealth. Prior to introducing the Belt and Road International Investment Initiative in October 2013, the wealth created by China's economy primarily served its elites and its massive bureaucratic workforce. The confidence in the Chinese economic miracle led the Xi Jinping administration to engage in unrestrained money diplomacy and launch the high-profile Belt and Road project. This year marks the 10th anniversary of the CCP's Belt and Road Initiative. Beijing will host the third Belt and Road International Cooperation Summit from October 17th to the 18th. Yet, like much other data from the CCP, the amount of money China has poured into the Belt and Road remains a mystery. In the initial years of the Belt and Road, beneficiary countries praised China. However, in recent years, discordant and even opposing voices have emerged in these countries. The most straightforward reason for this opposition is the delay in China's promised funds. An anonymous U.S. official told Bloomberg that the U.S. assesses China's Belt and Road to be in deep trouble as China's lending capacity diminishes while the pressure to recoup unpaid loans grows. This encapsulates the true reasons and evolution of how the Chinese economic miracle transformed overnight into the current economic crisis in China.